Hey, what's up? It's E. Smith here, former IBF junior middleweight champion of the world. Make sure you guys subscribe to the Sporting Icons. Cheers.
Now, I've kept quiet and silent for the best part of 2 years with this whole Errol Spence Jr., Terence Crawford, Errol Spence Jr., which way you want to play it out. I've kept very quiet on a lot of it. But of course, I've been watching, listening, and all that kind of stuff. And I have a real interest in watching this fight. As much as I don't really do too many videos on it, and the reason I don't do too many videos on it is because I'm quite selective with what it is I talk about, because the majority of my subscriber base is British. Okay, so they're interested in the British fights. Not everybody, of course. I mean, for me, I'm interested in boxing globally, and many of you guys on that are as well. But of course, I still have a lot of European subscribers and American, South American, etc., etc. But that's the reason why I haven't really spoken about it, because everybody else is. But I thought, you know what, let's go into it. And I want to give you all my thoughts when it comes to Terence Crawford and Errol Spence Jr. And we're going to get into the statements that's been had on Twitter just recently as well between the pair. Now, when I spoke with Bob Arum last week, this was one of the things that we spoke about. What's happening with this fight? When are we going to see this fight? Are we going to see this fight? Now, Bob Arum, what he said to me is pretty much what he said yesterday as well, which is he wants to make this fight. Crawford wants to make this fight. Al Heyman, the PBC side, want to make this fight. The networks want to make this fight. We're talking Fox, we're talking ESPN. But the one who keeps putting out roadblocks and excuses seems to be Errol Spence Jr. Okay, he's talking about A side, B side. He's talking about percentages. He's talking about wrong side of the street. He's talking about resumes. He's talking about all this kind of stuff. And at the end of the day, there's nothing wrong with Errol Spence doing that. Why shouldn't he try and squeeze out as much money as he possibly can? He's earned it, right? He's put himself into this kind of position where people want to see this fight. He should earn as much money as he possibly can. But so should Bud Crawford. But it does seem that Errol Spence Jr., he wants to be the clear A side. And a lot of his fan bases, before we get into a lot of this stuff, I'm noticing that a lot of the Errol Spence Jr. fan base, who were, I'm led to believe, were previous Terence Crawford fans, have now turned on Terence Crawford for some bizarre reason. It ain't Terence Crawford who's saying he don't want to fight. It ain't Terence Crawford who's coming up with obstacles. It ain't Terence Crawford doing any of this. It does seem to be Errol Spence Jr., where they're saying that Errol Spence is the A side. Terence Crawford should take 40%. He should take even less than that, all that kind of stuff. But yet these are the same people who's been supporting Wilder over Joshua, when Joshua was a clear A side in any of this. He was the one doing massive numbers at the box office. He was the one selling out stadiums. He was the name. Wilder had 1 belt. Joshua had 3 belts. Wilder didn't even have a pay-per-view at that point. But yet, they were saying how Wilder deserved 50-50. So where's the same energy when it comes to this particular fight? That's my question to a lot of these guys, okay? Now, when it comes to this fight, are we likely to see it? Yes. Are we likely to see it anytime soon? My opinion, no, is the answer. And as much as I like Terence Crawford, as much as I like Errol Spence Jr., and as much as I want to see the fight, it's a huge fight. I think globally, I think Joshua Fury would do much better at the box office, but I think the second biggest fight that boxing could possibly make would be this particular one. Stateside, if we're just talking stateside alone, Crawford and Spence would be a bigger fight at the box office than Fury Joshua. Okay, but globally, I think Fury Joshua just about edges it, or maybe excels it, I don't know. But in my opinion, and I think most people's opinion, it's the second biggest fight boxing could possibly make. And in this day and age, with everything that's going on, you need to make this fight ASAP. Because so many fighters are taking losses here. So many fighters are getting injured, having to retire, or this, that, and the other. That there's a good chance that this window of opportunity could go. So you need to grab it with 2 hands. Too many fighters out there want to talk about other fighters that they want to fight, but down the line. In the future, their legacy fight, their money fight. Very few actually get there. Very, very few. And those who do get there, it's usually a fight that has lacked a bit of luster. Where it was once very, very hyped, but by the time it gets there, it kind of petered off a little bit. And I've got a feeling this fight may be one of those, much like the Manny Pacquiao and Floyd Mayweather fight was. Much like Kell Brook and Amir Khan. Do people even want to see that fight anymore? I don't know. But either way, Bob Arum, he said that he wants to make the fight. Crawford wants to make the fight. Heyman wants to make the fight, so let's not blame Al Heyman, let's blame Errol Spence Jr. Anyway, Errol Spence Jr. has responded to this, and it is quite difficult to read Errol Spence Jr.'s tweet, so bear with me, okay? It's not me stuttering or anything like that, as usual, but it's his writing. Anyways, what Errol Spence Jr. said, Lion-ass Bob strikes again. Now, Bob Crawford, he then responds to Errol Spence saying, I've been a champion since March the 1st, 2014. 7 straight years is coming up. 3 different weight classes. If I was to retire right now, the Hall of Fame would be my next accomplishment. Sorry, can't say the same for, you know who. Errol Spence then responds to Bob Crawford and says this. Well, actually, there's 5 tweets here, so again, bear with me. All those accomplishments with names people won't remember. All I hear is accomplishments. I see so many greats I look up to inside the ring who didn't take care of business outside the ring and shut up and box shit being over, at least with me. Everybody tell boxers just fight. Nobody tell these guys in suits and networks who've been getting paid off boxers and effing them over for centuries, take a loss or break even on this one. You good money wise regardless, just want to see the fight. Instead of taking Bob 200 grand signing bonus, went without my advisor and didn't take a signing bonus, took a stipend a month for a year to hold me afloat till I started making okay money because I knew where I could take it. Believe in you. Thumbs up. I want to fight the best though, because Lord knows I'll use one of your favourite fighter as a tune-up. So that's Errol Spence Jr.'s statement. Now, I have no idea if that's just how Errol Spence Jr. just writes anyway. I don't know. Maybe he's got a bit of an illiteracy problem. It is what it is. Maybe he was driving, he was busy, or he was drunk again. I have no idea. But I think we can kind of get the gist of what he's talking about. He wants to get paid the maximum amount of money they could possibly can. And as I said, there's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with Crawford getting the same as well. But he has to be reasonable. He has to be reasonable, and he has to look at this objectively. And that's where I come in, because I have no horse in the race when it comes to these two. I like them both. Honestly, I do. And I couldn't honestly pick a winner. As I said before, if I had to, I'll probably just about edge it with Bud. Now, as far as the Hall of Fame for Bud Crawford, yes, he's a 3-weight world champion, of course. Former undisputed 140-pound champion. Getting the Hall of Fame? You betcha. Of course he will. Would Errol Spence Jr., as of right now, if he retired? No, he wouldn't. Now, I do hear a lot of Errol Spence Jr.'s fan base saying how he's got a better resume than Terence Crawford. He's a clear A-side and he does better numbers at the box office. Now, he may well do better numbers at the box office with Terence Crawford, but not by a lot, okay? Let's not talk about Errol Spence Jr. as some kind of new Floyd Mayweather superstar. He ain't doing the kind of numbers Floyd Mayweather used to do. He ain't doing the kind of numbers that Manny Pacquiao does, a Filipino in America. Spence ain't doing that. He did pretty good numbers, was about 350,000 when he fought Mikey Garcia. That was pretty good. Weren't great, but it was pretty good. But his numbers have dropped off since. Now, we could look at the resumes. Okay, so Terence Crawford, who could he pull out? We could pull out Ndongo. Of course, that was for undisputed. We could pull out a Ricky Burns. Ricky Burns was a very good fighter back in the day. We could look at Benavidez. We could look at Jeff Horn. We could look at Amir Khan. We could look at Kell Brook. Maybe 1 or 2 others. With Errol Spence Jr., we can look at Kell Brook. We can look at Sean Porter. We can look at Danny Garcia and Mikey Garcia. Now, when you break them all down, again, let's be perfectly objectable with this one, which is Errol Spence Jr.'s best win. Kell Brook, could we agree with that one? All right, let me explain. Would Mikey Garcia be his best win? On paper, maybe, but Mike Garcia was brought up 2 weight divisions. So how good was that win really? Mike Garcia didn't really throw a punch in that fight, did he? He was celebrating after each round, just the fact that he survived that round. So how good was that win really? Did good numbers at the box office? Yeah, because of Mike Garcia's Mexican heritage. That'll be why. So we'll move on to Kell Brook. Okay, Kell Brook, that was a very good win at the time. Kell Brook, he got injured. He got his orbital bone broken by Errol Spence Jr. Sure. But is that because it was Errol Spence Jr. or because he had weak orbital bones? Considering the very fight beforehand, Kell Brook had his other one broken by Triple G, Gennady Golovkin. So it's no coincidence really that if one eye went in that fight and then the other eye went in the Errol Spence Jr. fight immediately after, he had a problem with his orbital bones. It's not that Errol Spence Jr. punches ridiculously hard. I mean, I'm sure he does, but for me, that's not the excuse. And up to that orbital bone break, Kell Brook was handling Errol Spence Jr. quite comfortably. Let's be honest about it. And Kell Brook went another, 3 or 4 rounds, 5 rounds even, with one eye. So how good is that win? I still think it's a good win, by the way. But, so he's got Kell Brook. We can look at Sean Porter. Okay, that's a good win. We can look at Danny Garcia. That's another good win. Especially considering that Errol Spence Jr. was coming off of that horrific car crash that he was very, very lucky to survive. But still, very, very good win. But when you look at it realistically, Kell Brook beat Sean Porter. Sean Porter beat Danny Garcia. So we can look at it and say, but Errol Spence Jr. is quite clearly taking backward steps. Because he fought Kell Brook, then he fought a guy who Kell Brook beat in Sean Porter, then he fought a guy that Sean Porter beat in Danny Garcia. He's taking backward steps. We could say with, say, for example, Terence Crawford. Okay, Jeff Horn. Just look at that one. Well, who is it that Errol Spence Jr. would love to fight? Manny Pacquiao. Who beat Manny Pacquiao? Who delivered Manny Pacquiao's last loss? Jeff Horn. Who beat Jeff Horn? Terence Crawford. So let's have it right. Okay, sure, you can say that maybe the Pacquiao-Horn fight was a stitch-up. Okay, cool. But on paper, Jeff Horn beat Manny Pacquiao. We can look at Amir Khan. Amir Khan would probably go into the Hall of Fame, let's be honest. He probably would. Okay, when Crawford fought him, no, that wasn't a peak best Amir Khan, no. Amir Khan, did he quit in that fight? Absolutely he did. Should he have quit? No. Why? Because he got hit in the balls. Okay. Then he fought Kell Brook. Is that a washed up Kell Brook? I wouldn't say washed up, but it certainly wasn't the best Kell Brook, that's for sure. But he beat him far more convincingly than Errol Spence Jr. did. Benavidez, again, very, very good win. Sure, at times Crawford hasn't always looked great, but it is what it is. If he's got vulnerabilities, then that should give Errol Spence Jr. some confidence, surely. So anybody who wants to tell me that Errol Spence Jr. has a better career record than Bud Crawford, you've got to be smoking some kind of crack. Honestly, you've got to be. Because as I said, his best win is Mike Garcia, who was brought up 2 weight classes. Then he got Kell Brook. Then he took a backward step by fighting Sean Porter, who Kell Brook beat. Then he took another backward step by fighting Danny Garcia, who Sean Porter beat. And again, it was arguable that Sean Porter beat Errol Spence Jr. And Errol Spence Jr. got a gift decision. Again, that's debatable. But the point of this is, while both of these guys have every right to earn all kinds of money, there's only one person here who clearly doesn't want the fight. And that's Errol Spence Jr. He doesn't want the fight. I'm sure he's quite happy to go risk it against Canelo, but he's not happy to risk it against Bud Crawford. He wants to talk about A-side, B-side. If anything, Crawford should be the A-side in this one. Sure, he doesn't do as well at the box office, but again, I think that's because Top Rank, just for whatever reason, can't really attract some of the top welterweights out there. The PBC have the majority of the welterweights, so it's easier to make in-house fights. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why. It's also got to do with marketability as well, that Terence Crawford, he's not very outspoken on social media. He doesn't do interview after interview. He doesn't go around getting drunk and having car crashes, all that kind of stuff. Don't get me wrong, he's grabbed some headlines in the past for the wrong reasons. Notably, I'm talking about a garage incident. But the thing is, this fight isn't going to be there forever. The fans are not going to be interested forever. This is not Mayweather-Pacquiao. It's not. And never will be, I don't think. So my point is that the only person who seems to be avoiding this fight does seem to be Errol Spence Jr. And that's me being totally unbiased with all this one, because as I said, I've got no horse to pick in this race. None whatsoever. But you want to talk about A-side, B-side. Errol Spence Jr. is not the A-side when it comes to Bud Crawford. He's just not. He's just not. I think a 50-50 split is quite fair and quite generous, really, of Bud Crawford, considering his own accomplishments. Bud Crawford, a 3-weight world champion plus undisputed. Errol Spence Jr. isn't a 3-weight world champion. He's not a 2-weight world champion. He's a 1-weight world champion. Sure, he's unified. WBC, IBF. But if he wants to become undisputed, he needs to go see Bud Crawford. That's what he needs to do. It was Bud Crawford who was putting it on Errol Spence Jr. When are we going to fight? When are we going to do this? And it was Errol Spence Jr. saying about how I'm my own promoter, yada, yada, yada. Well, why didn't you go see Al Heyman? But what didn't you go see Al Heyman for? You're your own promoter, right? Why is Terence Crawford on the wrong side of the street? You're your own promoter. That makes you a free agent. That means you can fight on ESPN if you have to. Not that, according to Bob Arum, that's the only option, not at all. He's saying that he's quite happy for Crawford to go over the PBC. He's happy to do a dual promotion. So you guys earn as much money as you possibly can. But unfortunately, for me, I think it's the fans that are encouraging Errol Spence. It's the fans that are going, yeah, Spence, you're right. He's the truth. He's the A-side. As I said before, you weren't saying that when it comes to Wilder and Joshua, now were you? So let's be brutally honest on this one, okay? Brutally honest. Errol Spence Jr., and I don't like to say it because I did say that the winner of Kell Brook and Errol Spence Jr. is the legitimate number one in the welterweight division, as in above Keith Thurman at the time. And I stand by that to a certain degree. And the way when Errol Spence Jr. won the belt and when he's calling out Danny Garcia and he was calling out all these other guys, I'm like, yeah, that's what we're talking about. That's what we've been waiting for in the welterweight division. Somebody to get a belt and go, yeah, I want this, that and the other. I want these guys. And he was making all the right noises until Bud Crawford came along. Then he weren't making the right noises. The only noises that Errol Spence Jr. has been making is ones that sound like a whole lot of quack. If it sounds like a duck, it walks like a duck, it's probably a duck. Correct? Drop your thoughts below, click thumbs up, subscribe, catch you all in the next video.